Before the sun lifts over the hills, the barn is already awake. A young colt stamps and snorts, fighting a rope that isn't really there. Amy stands in the half-light, steady hands, tired eyes. She whispers, "Easy," but her voice shakes on the last breath. For a second, she hears a laugh that isn't in the room, a warm, familiar sound that used to make the horses settle faster. It vanishes like steam in the cold. The colt flinches again. So does Amy. She can say she's fine, but the horses always. Tell the truth. Asterisk morning at Heartland moves like clockwork, and Amy tries to lose herself in its rhythm. Feed water, muck, groom, repeat. It should help. Work always used to help. She lines up halters on the pegboard and keeps the aisle clean enough to eat off. It's not because anyone asks her to, but because order fills the space where the silence sits. Jack watches her from the doorway with that calm look that says he knows. More than he says, Lou walks through with a tablet in her hand talking about permits and deadlines, and she pauses only long enough to squeeze Amy's arm, gentle but firm. Tim pretends he is checking the fence line, yet his eyes keep drifting back to the barn. Everyone has their way of caring. Amy hears it, thanks them, and goes right back to work. It is the only way she can breathe. Lindy trots in wearing boots that are almost the size of her hope. She holds up a crayon drawing, all bright colors and brave lines. It shows 3 figures, Amy, Lindy, in a space that is not empty so much as open, like a door left wide. "Can we put it on the fridge?" Lindy asks. Amy smiles and says, "Of course." But when Lindy runs out again, the smile falls. Amy folds the drawing once, then again, and sets it by the feed bins so it won't get wet. She tells herself she will hang it later. She tells herself many things these days. By mid-morning, a dusty pickup rolls up the lane. A woman steps out with careful steps that say she is used to being careful. Her name is Sarah. And behind her in the trailer, a gelding bangs a hoof against the floor like a clock that doesn't want to tick. "He's a rescue," Sarah says. "We call him Ranger. He won't let anyone near his right side. He spooks." At Sudden Voices, "He hasn't loaded since the day we got him, and it took 6 people that time." "I heard you handle cases like this." Amy keeps her body soft, her voice calm. "You can try," she says. "We start slow, and we keep it fair." Sarah nods, but her eyes carry weeks of worry. The horse stops banging for 1 beat, as if listening. They swing open the trailer and Ranger is there, tall and coiled. With an old scar along his flank that runs like a pale river through dark hair, the mark pulls something loose in Amy's chest. Once, long ago, Ty leaned over a horse with a scar like that and said, "He's telling us where it hurts. All we have to do is hear him." Amy steps to the side, never head on. She lets Ranger smell the air around her. She says nothing for a long breath, then another. The horse flicks an ear. Amy hums without thinking, the tune that used to rise from the clinic like a small, warm light. It is a lullaby with no words, only patience. Ranger's head drops a few inches. The world softens at the edges. Sarah asks how long it will take. "A week," she says, half question, half hope. Amy should say, "We can't rush this." She should lay out a safe plan with soft goals and wide margins. Instead, she hears that old laugh in the space between one heartbeat and the next, and a bold promise is already on her tongue. "We'll aim for a week," she answers. Lou glances over from the yard, brows raised, but says nothing. Tim mutters something about grit. Jack says, "We'll take it 1 day at a time." Amy nods like she believes it, even as her chest tightens against the timeline she set. They move Ranger to a quiet pen. Wind rattles the poplars. Every sound is bigger inside her head than it is in the air. Amy shows Sarah how to stand with the horse in a way that is more like listening than handling. "Timing matters," she explains. "Pressure release, then wait for the try." The words are simple, the work is not. Ranger tests the line, then tests Amy, tossing his head, stepping sideways, looking for an old story to repeat. Amy does. Not grab or push, she gives him a place to choose her. When he takes a half step toward her hand, she lets the rope go slack and counts to 3. It is the kind of small win most people miss unless they live for it. Amy lives for it. She feels that quick flare of joy she has been running after for months. The one that says maybe this is the day everything turns a little lighter. But joy is tricky when you're still sore. Later, while Ranger chews hay in the corner, Amy walks back through the barn, and the quiet catches her off guard. The saddle racks are full. The aisle is clean.
Ow.
There is nothing left to scrub or stack. Her phone lights up with an old voicemail she forgot to delete. For a heartbeat, she almost presses play. Instead, she slips the phone face down on a bale and heads to the office to write notes. She writes too much the way people do when they're scared to feel. She writes a plan for Ranger, a schedule for the week, a list for Lou, a reminder for Tim, a line for Jack. She writes until the pen runs out and only then looks up. Lindy's drawing sits where she left it. Neat folds like a letter never sent. Amy picks it up and smooths the lines with her palm. She carries it to the house and sticks it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a horseshoe. It looks right there, honest and bright. We'll figure it out, she says to the room, too. The drawing, to herself. Back in the yard, Ranger lifts his head to the sound of her step. The wind moves through the grass. The day holds steady. Amy squares her shoulders and goes to meet the horse. Healing will not be fast. It will be fair. And if she can teach Ranger to trust the world again, maybe she will remember how to trust it too. Asterisk, the second day with Ranger starts before dawn. The mist still hugging the paddocks and the chill of the night lingering in the air. Amy walks toward the pen with a quiet determination, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. Ranger stands at the far corner, head high, ears flicking toward her and then away, as if deciding whether she's worth the trouble. She doesn't rush him. She leans against the fence post for a moment, letting the cool morning air fill her lungs, watching the gelding watch her. This isn't about forcing a connection. It's about earning one. She slips into the pen. Keeping her body turned slightly sideways, her eyes soft, her movements measured. The ground is damp, the smell of fresh hay still in the air. She takes a few slow steps, then stops, letting the space between them breathe. Ranger shifts his weight, a small sign he's thinking instead of reacting. That's progress, even if it's almost invisible. Amy knows most people wouldn't see it, but she feels it in the air. Every inch the horse gives her is a choice, not an accident. Jack watches from the fence line, hands resting on the top rail, his presence calm and steady. Don't crowd him, he says quietly, even though he knows she won't. His voice isn't a correction, it's a reminder. Almost like he's talking about more than just the horse. Amy catches the meaning but doesn't respond. She lifts her hand slightly, palm open, and waits. Ranger stretches his neck forward, nose twitching before pulling back again. Amy doesn't flinch, doesn't chase the moment. She lets it go, trusting it will come again. Lou appears a few minutes later, her jacket pulled tight against the morning breeze, carrying a mug of coffee that sends curls of steam into the cold air. You've got a council meeting at noon, she reminds Amy, her voice soft but practical. Amy nods without looking away from Ranger. I'll be there. Lou studies her for a beat, as if weighing whether to push the conversation further, then walks back toward the house. Amy knows her sister worries that she's burying herself in work to avoid facing the truth about Ty. But she can't explain how much she needs this, how much she needs to fix something, even if it's just a frightened horse by mid-morning. The pen is quiet except for the occasional swish of Ranger's tail. Amy takes a slow step forward, then another. When she's within arm's reach, she lowers her hand, not toward his face, but toward his shoulder, offering contact where he feels safer. Ranger hesitates, then takes a half step toward her. His breath fans across her fingers. It's not trust, not yet, but it's the start of a bridge between them. She steps back right after, ending the session on his choice instead of hers. Sarah arrives just in time to see Ranger following Amy along the fence line at a safe distance. That's more than he's done for anyone, she says, her voice holding both relief and disbelief. Amy shrugs lightly. He's thinking about trying. It's the first win. She explains the plan for the next few days' short sessions. No pressure. building confidence from the ground up. Sarah listens closely, nodding at each point, but Amy can see the impatience in her eyes. Owners always want a quick fix, but quick fixes break faster than they heal. Later, while leading Ranger back to the barn, a sudden gust rattles the tin roof. The sound is sharp, metallic, and Ranger jumps sideways, muscles tight with panic. Amy turns her body away from him, lowering her own energy until it's steady again. "It's just wind," she murmurs, though she knows the horse doesn't speak her language. What he understands is the calm in her breathing and the stillness in her stance. Within a minute, he stops moving and his ears flick toward her again. She strokes his neck gently before unclipping the lead and letting him settle. The rest of the afternoon, Amy finds herself thinking about Ty. She remembers how he used to handle moments like that. How his voice would go low. How he'd let a horse come to him instead of chasing them. The memory stings, but it also steadies her. She catches herself humming again, the same wordless tune she used yesterday, without even realizing she'd started. It feels like Ty's presence lingers in that melody, not as a ghost, but as a lesson, as the sun begins to sink. Amy leans on the fence and watches Ranger graze in the fading light. She knows tomorrow might not go as smoothly, that progress can vanish overnight. But she also knows they've taken the first real step towards something better for Ranger, and maybe for herself. The cold air bites at her cheeks, but she stays a moment longer, because standing here feels like choosing to keep going. And right now, that's enough. The third day starts with a restless wind sweeping across the Heartland fields, bending the tall grass and rattling the barn doors. Amy pulls her jacket tighter as she heads toward Ranger's pen, a bucket of feed swinging at her side. She can feel the weather before it turns horses always feel it first. Ranger is already pacing, head high, eyes sharp, his muscles wound. Like springs, today won't be easy. Nervous energy like this spreads quickly, and Amy knows that if she doesn't keep her own emotions steady, he'll mirror her unease. She doesn't go straight in. Instead, she leans on the gate and just watches him for a moment. His pacing slows when she doesn't advance, as if curiosity is already tugging him toward her. Jack's voice drifts from behind, calm and low. Sometimes giving them space is the only way to close the gap. Amy glances over her shoulder at him, giving a quick smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. "I know," she says, and she does, but she also knows that her own heart has been pacing just as much as you. Ranger's these past months, when she finally steps inside. She keeps her body language loose, shoulders relaxed, steps slow. She sprinkles a little grain in the dirt, not as a bribe, but as an invitation. Ranger stops, ears flicking toward the sound, and after a pause, he lowers his head to sniff the feed. Amy takes that moment to step just a little closer, careful, not to cross the invisible line where his comfort ends. They stand like that for a while, her breathing deep and even, his shifting from guarded to curious. It's a fragile truce, and she treats it like glass. Halfway through the morning, Sarah arrives, wrapped in a thick scarf, her eyes scanning Ranger's movements with an anxious precision. "He looks calmer," she says hopefully. Amy nods. But she doesn't let the optimism rush her pace. "He's thinking," she replies. "That's what we want." Sarah bites her lip and glances toward the barn. "Do you think he'll be ready to load soon?" The question hangs between them, heavier than it sounds. Amy doesn't promise this time. "We'll get there when he says we're ready," she answers firmly. They work in short intervals, each one ending before Ranger feels the need to bolt. Amy walks in a small circle near him, letting her movement become part of the environment instead of a threat. Every so often, Ranger takes a step to shadow her, not close enough for touch, but closer than yesterday. When he does, she stops, rewarding his choice with stillness rather than treats. She's teaching him that he controls how near or far they go, that trust doesn't come from being forced. The afternoon brings an unexpected challenge. Lou comes to remind Amy about the council meeting again, and this time she doesn't hide. Her concern, "You keep dodging everything except that horse," Lou says, her tone more frustration than accusation. Amy stiffens. "I'm working," she replies flatly.
Hey.
Lou sighs, shifting her weight. You're avoiding Amy. You can't fix Ranger to avoid fixing yourself. The words hit harder than Amy expects, but she doesn't respond. She simply turns back to Ranger, who's watching the exchange with those dark, unreadable eyes. The wind picks up again, sending a loose tarp flapping against the side of the barn. The sharp, sudden noise makes Ranger leap backward, eyes wide. Amy steadies herself, lowering her posture, murmuring softly until his breathing slows. She knows moments like this are what matter most, not when things go smoothly, but when the unexpected tests the trust they've built. Slowly, Ranger steps forward again, as if asking whether she's still worth following. She answers by taking one step back, giving him the space to come to her on his terms. By sunset, they've inched closer to something that feels almost like partnership. Ranger allows her to stand at his shoulder for a full minute, his head lowered, his body loose. It's a quiet victory, the kind that doesn't look like much to outsiders, but means everything to the ones doing the work. Amy runs her hand lightly along his neck, feeling the warmth under his coat. For the first time since he arrived, she senses he's not just tolerating her, he's beginning to consider her part of his safety. As she walks back toward the barn, the sky deepens into shades of gold and violet. The cold bites at her skin, but her chest feels warm in a way it hasn't for a long time. Maybe because for those brief moments in the pen, the ache for Ty wasn't in control, it was there, but quieter. Softened by the presence of a creature, learning to trust again. Amy knows tomorrow could undo some of this progress. Healing isn't a straight line, but today, they moved forward. For now, that's enough to keep both of them trying. Asterisk, the fourth day breaks under a pale sky, the kind that feels caught. Between seasons, too cold for spring, too soft for winter. A thin layer of frost silvers the fence rails, and Amy's breath clouds the air as she crosses the yard. Oh, she's carrying nothing this time. No bucket, no rope, just herself. Sometimes, the best tool you have is the absence of one. Ranger is at the far side of the pen, head down, grazing in slow, cautious bites. When he hears her steps crunch on the frozen ground, his ears flick, but he doesn't move away. That small choice feels like a quiet welcome. She stops at the gate, leaning on the top rail, and just watches him. Patience has been the unspoken rule between them, but today she wants to stretch it further. Amy knows real trust isn't built in the moments you control. It's forged in the moments you release control entirely. She opens the gate and slips inside without a lead, her steps easy and slow. The air smells faintly of damp earth as the frost begins to melt. She stands still, her hands resting at her sides, her eyes not locked on him, but aware of every shift in his weight, every flick of his tail. Minutes pass before Ranger looks up fully, chewing the last of his mouthful before turning toward her. His steps are measured, cautious but not panicked. He stops a few feet away, and Amy resists the urge to close the gap. She lets the silence work for her, lets him decide what happens next. Eventually, his nose stretches forward, brushing the sleeve of her jacket. The contact is light, almost uncertain, but it's his choice and that makes it more valuable than any forced touch could ever be. Jack appears at the fence, coffee in hand, watching quietly. He's starting to see you as part of his world, he says. Amy nods, eyes still on Ranger.
And
not as the thing that chases him, she adds softly. Jack's smile is small, but genuine.
that's the difference between breaking a horse
And building one. Amy doesn't reply, but she feels the truth in his words. Midday brings a harder test. Sarah suggests they try leading Ranger outside the pen for a short walk. Amy hesitates, knowing they're still on fragile ground, but she agrees it's time to see how he handles open space with her as his guide. She clips the lead gently, keeping the rope loose, letting it hang like a suggestion rather than a demand. Ranger's ears swivel nervously as they step through the gate, the open yard stretching before them. Every shadow, every rustle of wind. Feels like a question he's waiting to answer with flight. They take only a few steps before a crow bursts from the fence line, wings flapping loud in the stillness. Ranger jerks back, his weight pulling on the lead. Amy doesn't tighten her grip, She steps with him, moving in a curve until his eyes find hers again. "It's okay," she murmurs, voice low and steady. Slowly his muscles soften, and the rope goes slack again. Sarah exhales sharply, clearly having held her breath through the moment. Amy glances back and gives her a reassuring nod, though her own pulse is still quick from the surge of energy. By the time they reach the barn, Ranger is walking at her shoulder without crowding, his stride matching hers. They don't push for more today. She ends the walk on that note, unclipping the lead and letting him wander the yard while she leans against the fence. The sun has burned away the frost, and the fields shimmer in the pale light. Lou walks past on her way back from town, giving Amy a quick look that's part approval, part reminder. "Council votes tomorrow," she says. The thought of it feels distant, unimportant compared to the living. Breathing progress in front of her. As evening settles, Amy returns Ranger to the pen. She stays with him a few minutes longer, not working, not asking for anything, just existing. Beside him in the fading light, he doesn't walk away. For someone else, it might seem like nothing. But for Amy, it's the kind of victory that stays with you. Standing there, she realizes something. This isn't just about Ranger learning to trust her. It's about her learning to live in the moments she can't control. It's the ones that don't bend to her will. When she finally heads toward the house, the porch light is already on, casting a warm glow across the yard. She glances back once, catching Ranger watching her, his head over the rail. It's not attachment yet, but it's the start of recognition. And for the first time in a long time, Amy feels like she's not entirely alone in the quiet. The fifth morning rises with a thin sun and a restless ranch. Cold wind runs along the fence like a rumor, and that feeling something is about. Two-tip sits in Amy's chest before the day even starts. She heads for Ranger's pen with a plan to try the loading ramp for the first time. Slow and simple, just one hoof on the board and back off again. But the plan shifts the moment she hears Tim in the round pen, his voice too loud, his patience too short. A young colt bolts hard left and clips the panel with a hind leg. The crack of metal rings out. Amy turns on instinct and moves the ramp. Forgotten by the time she reaches them, the colt is breathing hot and wild. A nick opening along the cannon bone, not deep but messy. Tim is already angry at himself, which always sounds like anger at the world. He was fine and then he just... Amy lifts a hand, not to scold, just to stop the spiral. "Hose, clean, wrap," she says, the words flat with focus. They work in quick rhythm, cold water, gauze, steady hands. Tim keeps glancing at her like he wants her forgiveness and will never ask for it. When the bandage is set, the colt's breathing slows. Amy strokes his neck, and the guilt in Tim's eyes softens into shame. "I pushed," he mutters. "I know," she answers, not unkind. "Don't push today." He nods and walks away like a man carrying a saddle he can't put down. Lou appears as the crisis fades, her tablet tucked under her arm. The council schedule open to the page she keeps showing Amy. Public vote is tomorrow.
Oh.
They'll ask about traffic, noise, permits, all of it. She pauses. They'll ask for you. Amy's shoulders draw tight. "I have Ranger." Lou sighs. Quiet but sharp. "You also have a voice, and the town needs to hear it." Amy doesn't say yes and doesn't say no. She just looks across the yard where Ranger watches from behind his rail, ears pricked, body ready to flee or follow depending on what comes next. Jack and Lisa choose this exact day to anchor the house with something warm. Dinner tonight. Jack calls from the porch. Real food, real talk, no excuses. Amy wants to say she'll be there, and she wants to mean it. But Ranger is a story still being written, and she is not good at putting down a pen in the middle of a sentence. "I'll try," she tells him. Jack nods once, a signal that try is enough for now. Back at Ranger's pen, Amy prepares. The practice ramp. It's just a sturdy plank and a pair of side rails, a small stage for a big fear. She lets him sniff everything first, lets him decide the distance, lets the new shape become part of the world instead of a trap. The wind lifts the corner of a tarp, and it snaps like a flag. Ranger jumps, then remembers the last 4 days and looks back at her instead of running. She answers with a step back and open hands. He lowers his head. One hoof touches the edge of the board, testing, then slides off. She praises the try and ends the pass, walking a slow circle so his mind can file the moment under survived. Sarah arrives with tense hope and a bag of carrots she doesn't offer. She has learned not to bribe the truth. Amy shows her the rhythm approach. Breathe, one hoof, release. On the third approach, Ranger plants both front feet on the board, muscles trembling like a question. Amy does nothing to hold him there. He backs off when he wants, and she lets him, releasing pressure as if it's the only language they share. Why not keep him up there? Sarah whispers. Because he gave us what he could, Amy says. If we respect that, he'll offer more. Respect is slower than force, but it builds something that doesn't break. Mid-afternoon, Tim circles. Back with an apology that sounds like a report. Colt's resting. I set the panels right. Won't happen again. Amy nods, grateful and tired. He hesitates, then adds, I know pushing gets me in trouble. With horses, with people, the words land heavier than the wind. Amy meets his eyes. You don't have to be first to the finish line, she says. You just have to be right. When you get there, he laughs once, short and honest, and the tension between them thins into something like truce. Lou texts a reminder dinner at 7, and Amy reads it without answering. She gives Ranger one last pass at the ramp. This time, he places one front hoof, then the other, and stands breathing hard, eyes searching her face. Amy counts to 5 in her head, and then steps aside, inviting the back feet to follow without. Pulling they don't. Not today. He backs off, but he doesn't explode. He chooses retreat without panic, and that choice is gold. Good, Amy says, and means it with her whole chest. She ends the session right there, because ending on a try is a promise kept. Twilight brings a soft blue quiet to the yard, and with it the pull of the house. The porch light glows, and voices drift from the kitchen. Lindy's high and bright, Jack's low and sure, Lisa's warm, Lou's quick. Amy hesitates on the path, boots scuffing the packed dirt. She tells herself she'll only stay for a minute. Inside, the table is set with comfort. Stew steaming, bread torn, plates waiting. There is an extra chair no one names. Lindy grabs Amy's hand and tugs her to the seat beside her. You came, she says, as if that in itself is a win. Did, Amy answers, surprised to hear how true it sounds. They eat. They talk around the heavy things first: permits, hay deliveries, the neighbors' wandering heifers. The warmth of real food and easy stories loosens the knots that have lived under Amy's ribs. Then Lindy points at the empty chair. Is Daddy coming? The room stills the way a pen stills when a gate swings shut. Amy swallows and chooses the kind of truth that does not shatter. Not today, she says. Lindy thinks about that then. Nods, like a child who understands that honesty is its own kind of love. Jack reaches across and squeezes Amy's hand once. Rough palm, steady anchor. After dinner, Lou brings up the vote one more time. Softer now. Tomorrow isn't just policy. It's Heartland. It's the therapy program. It's the kids who come. Here because the world is loud everywhere else. Amy looks at her sister and sees the plea under the logic. I'll speak, she says. The words scare her and free her at the same time. Lou's shoulders drop in relief.
Good,
she whispers, as if a piece of the ranch just settled back where it belongs. When the dishes are done and Lindy is in pajamas, Amy slips back outside. The night is clear, stars poking through like pins in dark cloth. She walks to Ranger's pen with a blanket over her arm and stands with him while he breathes the cold. He steps forward and touches his nose too. Her shoulder, not a lean, just a touch, then returns to his hay. It is not dependence. It is hello. Amy drapes the blanket over the rail for the colder hours and rests her hand on the wood. She thinks of the empty chair, the vote tomorrow, the ramp, the patience that keeps saving them both. She thinks of Ty, not as a wound that burns, but as a weather front that moved through and left the air changed. On the way back to the house, her phone buzzes in her pocket. A notification she doesn't want to see flashes a new device found an old voicemail. She almost taps it. She almost listens. Instead, she presses the screen dark, and lifts her eyes to the porch where a square of warm light waits. The past will not vanish, and she is done trying to erase it. Tonight she chooses presence. The soft thud of rangers' hooves in the quiet yard, the hush of the fields, the hum of family behind a thin wall. Tomorrow she will stand up and speak for Heartland. Tonight she will let herself belong to it.